Don't trip, you know? I know things is hard right now. You looking for a job. You out there hustling.
Well, it's been a very interesting day. A lot going on. I made maybe 6 or 7 telephone calls to the U.S. Attorney's Office today. I sent off 6 emails to people at the U.S. Attorney's Office. I sent off other emails to interested and disinterested parties, and I got a lot of feedback, and I think I've kind of figured out what's happening. I reached out to a source that I cultivated a couple of years ago that works inside of the judicial branch. Let's just put it that way. And so I had an hour-long conversation with her. And it looks like when you put all these pieces together, here's what you have. Corrupt Compton police. Nothing happens to them. Officer gets shot with a gun that flows through the Compton evidence locker and through death row. Reggie Wright Jr., Reggie Right Sr. have their fingerprints all over that gun, literally, and nothing happens to them. You have Reggie Wright Jr., who gets a disability pension but continues to work doing all kinds of stuff, including as the CEO of Death Row Records. And that's wire fraud, and nothing happens. This has all been pointed out to me today. You have the Ninth Circuit Court, and the Wallace civil trial is dismissed on a flimsy grounds because the government is running cover. They had a very strong case, and they would have won, and the city of Los Angeles would have had to pay, and for whatever reason, the government and the court, the Ninth Circuit Court, digs in and says, we're going to dismiss this. So the government basically is covering for the rights, for the Compton Police Department, for, the word is being bandied about, so let's call it what it is, the deep state. It's a rat line that runs into the drug business. So years ago, I was in Nicaragua, and I was there with, mercenaries, hired contractors. I didn't get along with them. They didn't get along with me. And it was kind of an explosive situation. But I heard stories, and I heard stories about George Herbert Walker Bush and how, the drugs were being used to fund the mining of the port in Bluefields, and I was in Bluefields, and I went up to 2 little villages, and so anyway, I learned a lot back then. I heard all these rumblings. I launched a company in Arkansas. I heard about Mena, Arkansas. I heard about drugs coming into Mena, Arkansas, and being distributed from there. And we walked that forward to what was going on a little bit later, and what did we have? We had Compton. We had 6 helicopters in a 10-square-mile city. What were those 6 helicopters doing? They were running drugs, and one of those crashed, and it crashed at the school district, and there was a warehouse there, and in the warehouse they found drugs. Nothing ever happens. You have Death Row Records, huge federal probe, money laundering, racketeering, drug trafficking, and what happens? Nothing happens. Nothing happens. And then you have people that have cases against them, like Suge Knight, for instance. Suge Knight, there's a videotape that shows that Suge Knight acted in self-defense, period. If you look at it, you see, that Cleabone has a gun that gets picked up and is put in somebody's waistband as they walk off. Suge Knight was being attacked by men with guns, and he hit the gas and he ran over. Terry happened to trip in front of the vehicle, and he got killed. Suge Knight's been, by the time his trial comes around, he will be 3 years in jail because Suge Knight knows something. And then we also have Suge Knight is being contacted by SKG, the Suge Knight girl. And I'll include a link to that in the notes of this. And you can actually listen to this woman talking about how Suge called, and Reggie, she happened to be over at Reggie's house when Suge called. And this is recent. They're talking on this show about All Eyes on Me, so this is June sometime. And so Reggie and Suge have been talking recently. And then, of course, Suge is in jail, and he's comes out, and the TMZ thing happens, and he's trying to talk desperately to David Kenner since the whole arrest of Reggie and Reggie. And so what I've been told is that the rights have been being covered for years. You have Reggie Wright Sr., whose pension is higher than Barack Obama's pension. I mean, does that tell it all? You have a sheriff lieutenant who is getting paid more with his pension than the former president of the United States. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And today, real simple, I finally get somebody on the phone at the Justice Department who's working on this case, and I say to her, I say, yes or no question, are they still defendants in the case? And she says, I really wish I could help you. And I say, look, it's just yes or no. I mean, it's just simple. And I talked to her. I chatted her up. I told her, look, it's not personal. I'm not trying to, I'm not trying to be too much of a pest. She goes, yeah, I know you've called a lot of times. And, and she had dodged my phone calls, but I finally got her on the phone. She could not tell me if they are defendants in the case, yes or no. I reached out, I did emails to the 2 U.S. attorneys and asked them the same thing, yes or no. Are they defendants in the case still? And I got no response. So here's the reality. Whatever these guys know, and it must be a lot, they must be in some kind of a haggle, some kind of negotiations about what it is, because they should have just said, yes, they're defendants in the case, and that would have been the end of it. I would have left them alone. But they didn't. They couldn't, because something is going on with this case. And what I was told today about the Wallace civil trial and all the documentation on it, and how the Ninth Circuit really had no legal standing to rule that the case needed to be dismissed, but they were covered for by the government. And the reality of this whole thing, and who was the big suspect in the Wallace civil trial, was Reggie Wright Jr. Why does that thing get dismissed? It gets dismissed because the government is covering for these crooked-ass cops. And it leads to the deep state. It leads to drugs being put out on the streets of America. It leads to covert funding for covert activities. God knows what it is. We don't know. And I just say this. Whatever the entire story is in this case, we don't know it. And we're going to keep digging till we find out what's going on with this case. Because we really don't know. I mean, some people think they know, but I've talked to people inside the federal government today who don't know what's going on with this case. And if people inside the federal government that are close to this case can't tell me what's going on with this case, then how can we trust other people who think they know what's really going on with this case? I don't think any of us are prepared for whatever this outcome is going to be. But let's hope that it's favorable for us, because we will all breathe easier if bad people get locked up. But somehow, I just don't think it's going to go the way we all think it should go. And there's going to be some winners and some losers. We may not be the winners. And I think we all need to put whatever pressure we can upon the powers that be to do the right thing here and to let them know that they've had the opportunity. DAs had plenty of opportunity to put the rights away back in the Compton era, but never happened. They had the chance to put them away with this whole federal thing going on, the wire fraud. I mean, you know, it just stinks to high heaven. I'm hoping that there's going to be a positive outcome. I think it's going to be due to the crowd if it does happen. Because if we all look the other way and we let them, they will let these guys go. They've covered for them for years and years and years. There's no reason why they won't cover for them again if these guys talk and give them something juicy. Let's just hope.
You already know. Young black male, young black woman. The minority to the majority. Still don't change. It's like it never will change. They won't bother. I lost a brother, but my niece, she lost her father. And how do I feel? How can I be real? Feeling this way, the way they drag down in me till it's messed up, man. My hands on the wheel, I'm still drunk driving. Road rage got me feeling like I'm out of my mind. I'm on the stage, feeling like crime, but I see these people in this place. Gotta speak the real, gotta keep it real. When I rap like this, it give me the chills. I hope you really feel what you really feel. Do what you do to make money just to pay your bills. It's messed up, they don't wanna see us going forward. Making sure I hold down the last name doors. It's been wild like a wild force, but I bet God got something better for us.